Hello, my name is Duncan, and for the past 9 years, I believed I had built a life that was stable, happy, and filled with love. My wife Lorna was my rock, my confidant, and my best friend, or so I thought. What happened last week at her company's annual holiday party left me questioning everything, including my own sanity. Lorna works as a regional manager for a growing tech firm, and every December, her company holds this elaborate event to celebrate the year's achievements. She always looks forward to it. This year, she was particularly thrilled because it was the first time the CEO himself was attending. She had spent weeks preparing for the event, working late hours and perfecting every detail. I was proud of her. How could I not be? Lorna has always been ambitious, and her drive is one of the things that drew me to her in the first place. When she invited me to attend, I was hesitant at first. Big social events aren't really my thing, but Lorna insisted. "It'll be fun, Duncan," she said, her hazel eyes lighting up with excitement. "You'll finally get to meet my team and see what I've been working so hard for." How could I say no to that? The night of the party, I put on my best suit, and Lorna looked breathtaking in a navy blue gown that hugged her figure perfectly. As we arrived at the Grand Hotel ballroom where the event was being held, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. She had organized everything down to the last detail, the decorations, the catering, even the live band playing soft jazz in the corner. First, everything felt normal. Lorna introduced me to her coworkers, and they all seemed friendly enough. I mingled, made polite conversation, and sipped on a glass of sparkling water. But as the evening went on, I started to notice small things that didn't sit right with me. It was the way Lorna interacted with her assistant manager, Nolan. Their exchanges were lighthearted, sure, but there was an undertone I couldn't quite place. A shared laugh that seemed too personal, a fleeting touch on the arm that felt too familiar. I told myself I was overthinking it. After all, Nolan was her subordinate, and Lorna was nothing if not professional. But the unease grew. At one point, I stepped away to use the restroom. When I returned, I found Lorna and Nolan standing by the bar, their heads close together as they whispered about something. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should I interrupt? Would that make me look insecure? Instead, I decided to wait. And then it happened. Nolan said something that made Lorna throw her head back in laughter. A loud, uninhibited laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. She leaned in, playfully swatting his arm, and he responded by wrapping his hand around her waist for a brief second. It was so quick, so subtle, that no one else seemed to notice. But I did. My chest tightened, and my face grew hot. I felt like an outsider in my own marriage, standing there, watching my wife share a moment of intimacy with another man. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I wanted to believe that I was misinterpreting everything. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Lorna eventually spotted me and waved me over, her smile as bright as ever. "Duncan, come meet Nolan," she said, her tone cheerful and completely oblivious to my internal turmoil. I forced a smile and shook his hand, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I barely remember the speeches, the music, or even the food. All I could think about was the way Lorna had looked at Nolan, the way she had laughed with him, and the way her hand had lingered on his shoulder just a moment too long. By the time we got home, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my thoughts. Lorna, on the other hand, was in high spirits, talking about how well the party had gone and how the CEO had complimented her organizational skills. I wanted to bring it up, to ask her about Nolan, but the words wouldn't come out. What if I was wrong? What if I ended up ruining the night over a misunderstanding? So I stayed silent, pretending everything was fine, even as doubt gnawed at me from the inside. Little did I know, that night was only the beginning. The days following the party were unbearable. Every time I looked at Lorna, I saw flashes of that night. Her laughter, the way Nolan touched her, the way she seemed so carefree in his presence. It wasn't just jealousy. It was something deeper, a gnawing sense of betrayal that I couldn't shake, even though I didn't have any real evidence to back it up. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. "She loves you, Duncan," I told myself again and again, "You're just being paranoid." But even as I tried to rationalize it, my mind kept wandering back to the moments that felt off. Lorna didn't seem to notice my unease. She was busier than ever at work, staying late most nights and coming home exhausted. Normally, I'd have been understanding. Her job was demanding, and I'd always admired her dedication. But now, every late night, every missed text, felt like another nail in the coffin of my peace of mind. One evening, about a week after the party, I decided to bring it up. I waited until after dinner, when Lorna was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. "Lorna," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up, her brow furrowed in concern. "Of course, what's wrong?" I hesitated, unsure how to phrase it without sounding accusatory. "At the party, you and Nolan seemed really close. Is there something I should know?" For a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then she laughed. A soft, dismissive chuckle that made my stomach twist. "Duncan, seriously?" she said, shaking her head. "Nolan and I work together every day. We have to be close. It's part of the job. But that's all it is, work. There's nothing going on." Her words should have reassured me, but they didn't. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. The way she avoided my eyes, the way her voice was just a little too casual. I don't know," I stammered, feeling the heat rise to my face. It seemed like there was more to it. Lorna's smile faded, and her expression turned cold. "Duncan, do you even hear yourself right now? You're accusing me of what exactly? Laughing at a joke? Being friendly with a coworker?" "I'm not accusing you," I said quickly, trying to backtrack. It felt strange, that's all." "Well, maybe you need to figure out why you're so insecure," she snapped, standing up and grabbing her phone. "Because I'm not going to justify every little thing I do to you. If you don't trust me, that's your problem." She stormed out of the room, leaving me sitting there in stunned silence. My heart sank. I hadn't meant to start a fight. I just wanted answers. But instead of feeling closer to her, I felt even more isolated. Over the next few days, things between us grew tense. Lorna barely spoke to me, and when she did, her tone was clipped and distant. I told myself to let it go, to trust her, but the doubts wouldn't leave me alone. Then, one evening, I found something that shattered whatever fragile trust one had left. Lorna had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she went to take a shower. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but as I walked past, I noticed an email notification pop up. It was from Nolan. My heart pounded as I glanced at the subject line. "Last night was amazing." I froze. My mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was it work-related? A joke? Or was it exactly what it sounded like? I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but in that moment, I couldn't stop myself. I clicked on the email. What I read made my blood run cold. "Lorna, I can't stop thinking about how perfect last night was. You looked stunning, as always, and I'm already counting the days until we can do it again. Let me know when you're free. I'll make it worth your while. Nolan." My hands shook as I stared at the screen. The words blurred together, but the meaning was crystal clear. This wasn't about work. This wasn't a joke. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The woman I had loved and trusted for nearly a decade had betrayed me, and now I had the proof. The sound of the shower turning off jolted me back to reality. Panic set in. I quickly closed the laptop and stepped away, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her? Pretend I didn't see it? I had no idea. All I knew was that everything had changed. The night after my conversation with Lorna was unbearable. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me, as if nothing had happened. I wanted to believe her, that it was a one-time mistake, a lapse in judgment. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore the doubts clawing at my mind. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed more proof before confronting her again. I started paying closer attention to everything. How often she checked her phone, how long she stayed at work, how she avoided certain topics whenever I asked about Nolan. Then, one evening, I saw a notification pop up on her phone while she was in the shower. My pulse quickened as I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Nolan. That was unforgettable. Can't wait for more. My stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't just friendly banter. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was exactly what I had feared. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but in that moment, I couldn't stop myself. My hands trembled as I unlocked her phone, scanning through their messages. Nolan. I still can't believe how easy it was for us to sneak away. That moment was perfect. Lorna. It felt different, I won't lie. But I don't know what to do now. Nolan. Just say when, and I'll make sure we have more time together. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. She wasn't just talking to him. She was making plans. At that moment, I heard the shower turn off upstairs. I quickly placed the phone back where it was and stepped away. My heart pounded as I tried to process what I had just read. When Lorna walked into the room, wrapped in a towel, she smiled at me like nothing was wrong. Hey, she said casually, drying her hair. Everything okay? I forced myself to nod, but my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until I had decided what to do next. The silence between us stretched like a chasm, unbearable and heavy. Lorna stood frozen in the doorway, her face a mix of guilt and panic. I could feel my chest tightening as I held her phone in my trembling hand, still displaying the damning messages between her and Nolan. Finally, she broke the silence. Duncan, she said, her voice shaking. It's not what you think. I couldn't help but laugh. A bitter, hollow sound that echoed through the kitchen. Not what I think? I repeated, my voice rising. You're planning nights together. He's talking about how incredible it was. What exactly am I supposed to think, Lorna? Enlighten me. She took a tentative step forward, her hands raised like she was trying to calm a wild animal. Please, just let me explain, she pleaded. Explain what? I shot back, my voice cracking. Explain how you've been lying to me? How you've been sneaking around behind my back? How long, Lorna? How long has this been going on? She flinched at my words, her eyes filling with tears. It's not like that, Duncan. It was just one night. It didn't mean anything. One night, I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Because it doesn't, Lorna. It makes me feel like a complete fool. She opened her mouth to say something but stopped, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her actions was finally settling on her. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. You didn't mean for this to happen? I said, my voice raw. You didn't accidentally end up in bed with him, Lorna. You made a choice. And you lied to me over and over. She collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table, burying her face in her hands. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her, trying to make sense of the mess my life had become. The woman I had trusted more than anyone in the world had betrayed me, and I didn't know if I would ever recover from it. Why? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this to me, to us? I thought we were happy, Lorna. I thought we had something worth holding on to. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I don't know, she said, shaking her head. I was stressed, Duncan. Work has been so demanding, and I felt like we were drifting apart. I wasn't thinking clearly. Drifting apart? I said, my voice rising again. And your solution was to cheat on me? To run to Nolan? You could have talked to me, Lorna. You could have told me how you were feeling. But instead, you chose this. She sobbed harder, but I felt no sympathy. I was too hurt, too angry to care about her tears. All I could think about was the years I had poured into our marriage, the sacrifices I had made, and how easily she had thrown it all away. I need some air, I said abruptly, turning toward the door. Duncan, wait, she called after me, her voice desperate. I didn't stop, couldn't. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside into the cold night air, letting the door slam shut behind me. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, trying to process what had just happened. Memories of our life together flashed through my mind. Our wedding day, the vacations we took, the quiet nights on the couch watching movies. It all felt like a cruel joke now, like I had been living a lie. By the time I made it back home, the lights were still on, but the house was eerily quiet. Lorna was sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. She looked up when I walked in, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Duncan," she said softly. "I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I love you, and I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." Her words felt hollow, like they were coming from someone I no longer recognized. I wanted to believe her, but the damage had already been done. "I don't know if we can fix this," I said, my voice flat. "Right now, I don't even know who you are." She started to cry again, but I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her alone in the living room. I needed time to think, to figure out what I was going to do. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized that the life I had built with Lorna was no longer the life I wanted. Something had broken between us, and I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. Nolan's words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. My grip tightened on the phone as I struggled to keep my emotions in check. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Duncan, listen, How long, Nolan?" I repeated more forcefully this time. Another long silence. Then finally, in a hesitant voice, he admitted, "A few months." My stomach clenched. Months. Not one mistake. Not one moment of bad judgment. This had been going on behind my back for months. "Why?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Why would you do this? You knew she was married." "I don't know," he muttered. "We got close, and things just happened." Things just happened? That was his excuse? I felt sick to my stomach. "I didn't mean for this to go this far," Nolan added quickly. "We didn't plan it, Duncan." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Didn't plan it?" I repeated. "So what, it just magically kept happening? Week after week." Silence. I clenched my jaw, breathing heavily. "You know what, Nolan? I don't care about your excuses. I just needed to hear the truth from you." Without another word, I ended the call, my hands shaking. The confirmation I had dreaded was now undeniable. Lorna had been lying to me for months. When she walked through the door later that evening, she looked tired, but when she saw me, her expression shifted. "Duncan?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "You okay?" I stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed. "I talked to Nolan." The color drained from her face. "What?" "I called him," I said, my voice firm. "I wanted the truth, and he told me everything." She swallowed hard, stepping closer. "Duncan, please, let me explain." I raised a hand, stopping her mid-step. "I don't want an explanation," I said, my voice raw. "I just want to know why. Why did you do this? And don't tell me it just happened. I want the truth." Tears welled in her eyes, and she collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I was selfish," she admitted in a broken voice. "I wasn't thinking about what I was doing. I wasn't thinking about you. I hate myself for it, Duncan." I stared at her, my chest aching. "You weren't thinking about me?" I repeated. "So where does that leave me now? Just another afterthought." She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll do anything to make this right." I exhaled shakily, the weight of everything crushing down on me. "I don't know if we can fix this, Lorna," I said quietly. "I don't even know where to start." She nodded, her hands gripping her knees. "I'll wait," she whispered, "as long as it takes." For the first time in days, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before, true regret. But whether or not that regret was enough to save us, I still didn't know. Nolan's words hung in the air, each one slicing through me like a blade. I felt my grip on the phone tighten, my breath shallow as I struggled to stay calm. "How far, Nolan?" I asked, my voice trembling. How far did it go? Duncan, look, he began, but I cut him off. Answer the question, I snapped. Don't dance around it. Tell me the truth right now. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear him swallowing his pride. It wasn't just one night, he admitted quietly. We've been seeing each other for a few months. My stomach dropped. Months. Not one mistake. Not one drunken lapse in judgment, but months of deception. All the late nights, the extra hours, the excuses, they all made sense now. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why would you do this? You knew she was married. I don't know, he said weakly. We didn't mean for it to happen, Duncan. It just did. I'm sorry. Sorry? I repeated, my voice rising. You're sorry? You've destroyed my marriage, and all you have to say is sorry. I didn't want it to come to this, he said, his tone defensive now. It wasn't just me, Duncan. She made her own choices. That was the final straw. I slammed the phone down, ending the call before I said something I'd regret. My hands were shaking, my mind racing as I tried to process what I just learned. Lorna had lied to me over and over again, and now I knew the full extent of her betrayal. But what was I supposed to do with this knowledge? Confront her? Walk away? Try to fix something that felt irreparably broken? I sat there for what felt like hours, staring blankly at the wall. Memories of our life together flashed through my mind, tainted now by the thought of her and Nolan. I thought about the promises we had made to each other, the life we had built, and how easily she had thrown it all away. By the time Lorna came home that evening, I had made up my mind. She walked into the living room, her face lighting up when she saw me. Hey, she said, her tone soft, almost hopeful. How was your day? I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. We need to talk, I said. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of apprehension. Okay, she said slowly, setting her bag down. What's going on? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to look her in the eye. I spoke to Nolan, I said. Her face went pale, and she took a step back, her hands trembling. You did what? I called him, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. I wanted the truth, and he told me everything, Lorna. Everything. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time since this nightmare began, she looked truly speechless. How could you do this to me? I asked, my voice breaking. How could you lie to me for months? How could you destroy everything we've built? Tears filled her eyes, and she reached out for me, but I stepped back. Duncan, please, she whispered. I can explain. No, I said firmly. I don't want your explanations. I don't want your excuses. I just want the truth, Lorna. Why? She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I don't know, she sobbed. I was selfish. I wasn't thinking about what I was doing. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, you did, I said, my voice cold. You hurt me more than I ever thought possible. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Finally, I stood up, my decision clear in my mind. I need time, I said, my voice steady. I need space to figure out what I want, because right now, I don't see how we can come back from this. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with panic. Duncan, please, she begged. Don't do this. Don't give up on us. You gave up on us the moment you let him into your life, I said, my voice firm. I'm not the one who ruined this, Lorna. You are. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her guilt and regret. I closed the door to the bedroom that night, but it felt more like I was closing the door to a chapter of my life. Lorna didn't follow me, which was both a relief and a strange kind of pain. I could hear her muffled sobs from the living room, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not after everything. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured her and Nolan. I imagined their stolen moments, their whispered conversations, the laughter they shared. My mind replayed their messages over and over, each word digging deeper into the wound. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay in the house. The walls felt too tight, the air too heavy. I needed space, a chance to think clearly without her presence clouding my emotions. Lorna was sitting at the kitchen table when I came downstairs, her face pale and drawn. She looked up at me with bloodshot eyes, her hands nervously clutching her coffee cup. "Are we going to talk about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. "Not right now," I said, grabbing my keys from the counter. "I need to get out of here for a while." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't try to stop me. "Where are you going?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I just need some time." She nodded, her expression hollow. "Take as much time as you need," she said softly. I walked out the door without looking back, my heart heavy but resolute. I spent the day driving aimlessly, the roads blurring together as my thoughts raced. I stopped at a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where no one asks questions and the coffee flows endlessly. I sat in a booth by the window, staring at my reflection in the glass as I tried to make sense of my life. How had it come to this? How had the woman I loved, the woman I trusted more than anyone, betrayed me so completely? And how was I supposed to move forward from here? A part of me wanted to walk away, to cut my losses and start over. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, the laughter, the love, wasn't ready to let go. Could we fix this? Did I even want to? I spent hours at that diner, replaying every moment of our relationship in my mind. I thought about our wedding day, the promises we had made, the life we had built together. I thought about the small moments, the quiet nights on the couch, the way she used to smile at me like I was the only person in the world. And I thought about Nolan, about the way she had laughed with him, the way she had let him into a part of her life that should have been mine. By the time the sun began to set, I still didn't have any answers. But I knew I couldn't avoid the inevitable forever. When I returned home that evening, the house was quiet. Lorna was sitting on the couch, her knees drawn up to her chest, staring blankly at the TV. She looked up when I walked in, her expression a mix of hope and fear. "Hi," she said tentatively. I nodded but didn't say anything as I hung up my coat and sat down in the armchair across from her. The silence between us was deafening, but I didn't know how to break it. Finally, Lorna spoke. "Duncan, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said, her voice trembling. "But I need you to know how sorry I am. If I could take it all back, I would." I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess. "Sorry doesn't change what happened," I said, my voice flat. "It doesn't erase the lies or the betrayal." "I know," she said quickly. "But I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. Just, please don't give up on us." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to believe her, to believe that she truly regretted what she had done. But trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to try. "I don't know what the future holds for us," I said finally. "But I need you to understand that this isn't something I can just get over. It's going to take time, if it's even possible." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll wait as long as it takes," she whispered. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward. But deep down, I knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Every day felt like a battle between my heart and my mind. One part of me wanting to hold on to the love we had built, the other part unable to forget the betrayal. Lorna was different now. The woman who had once been so sure of herself, so confident, was suddenly vulnerable, uncertain. She was willing to do whatever it took to prove to me that she regretted what she had done. At first, I didn't believe her, but over time, I started to see the sincerity in her actions. She deleted Nolan's number right in front of me and blocked him on every platform. She cut ties with him at work, requesting to be moved to another department. She gave me full access to her phone, her emails, anything I needed to feel secure. But more than that, she was present. She listened, She apologized without excuses, and she faced the pain she had caused instead of running from it. One night, after another long conversation about where we stood, she looked at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "I know I broke something in us, Duncan, and I know I might never be able to fix it. But I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life trying." Something in me cracked then. I had been holding on to so much anger, so much pain, that I hadn't realized how much I still loved her. That night, for the first time in months, I let myself hold her again. Healing wasn't easy. Some days were better than others. There were moments when the memories would creep in, when doubt would whisper in the back of my mind, but Lorna never wavered. She remained patient, understanding that trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. We started therapy together. At first, I wasn't sure it would help, but it forced us to talk, to face the problems in our marriage that had been ignored for too long. I learned things about her that I had never taken the time to notice before, and she, in turn, learned about the ways I had been hurting long before the betrayal. Slowly, piece by piece, we began to rebuild. A year later, I looked at Lorna across the dinner table, watching her laugh at something silly I had said, and I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The pain had faded, replaced by something deeper, understanding. She had made a terrible mistake, one that could have destroyed us. But she had chosen to stay and fight for our marriage. And I had chosen to let her. Trust wasn't something that had come back overnight, but it had returned, slowly but surely. We had built something new, something stronger than before. And for the first time in a long time, I knew we were going to be okay.